Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Chelik Hey. We're on Nun Vav Amid Aleph near the bottom. We're in Siman Tuf Nun Tes, and we're in middle of Sif Beis. So we are up to the words of the Ramah in Sif Beis, which in my Mishnah Berurah are all the way on the bottom of the page. Sorry about that, people on Facebook, but the camera fell over. That is better. Okay, so we're in the last line of the Shulchan Aruch here. We're at the words of the Ramah. Says the Ramah, Hagab, v'yesh lahachmer lemaher be'inyan asiyas hamatzos. We have to act quickly and with alacrity when we make the matzos. And I guess the way I would say it is, the process of the matzah baking has to work like clockwork. We have to make sure that we knead the dough, and right away we form the dough into a long log, and right away we break the pieces off, and right away we roll out the matzahs, and then right away we make the holes in the matzahs, and right away we get it in the oven. Everything has to go quickly, without any matzahs sitting around. Because like the Ramah says here, ki yesh lachush, because we need to worry, shahashihiyos, that all of the waiting time, all of the delays and the pauses in the baking process, when a piece of dough or a raw matzah, an unbaked matzah, is sitting on the table, all of those pauses, yitztarfu, will combine l'shir mil, for the amount of time that we said it takes to walk a mill, for that 18-minute time period where the dough could become chametz. Or we also have to worry, sheyiyah b'makom cham, that perhaps at some point in the process, the unbaked matzah, the dough, will end up somewhere where it's warm, shememahar lahachmetz, so that the chimutz process might be quickened, and we might have a problem. So once we start making the matzah, once we knead the dough, and we're dealing with unbaked dough, we want everything to move quickly without any pauses and without any delays. Says the Mishnah Berurah back on Nun Vav Amud Aleph, on the bottom line in Ois Katan Tez Zayin. Ki yesh lachush shehashehiyos. So what the Ramah just said is, we're worried. We know that while you're manipulating the dough, while you're working with the dough is not going to become chametz. However, we're worried that during any pauses in the process, so for example, you knead the dough. Now you have a dough. You give it to somebody who forms the dough into a long log. So far, the dough is still being manipulated. Now that person takes the dough, he breaks off a piece, he makes a little round piece, and he gives it out to somebody who's going to roll the matzah out into a matzah. Now, maybe he's already busy rolling out one matzah. So now you have a piece of dough that's sitting on the table. Now it's sitting. Maybe it sits for a minute. Maybe it sits for 2 minutes. Now somebody takes that piece of dough and he rolls it out into a matzah. While he's rolling it into the matzah, it's not going to become chametz because it's being manipulated. But now he finishes the matzah and he puts the matzah down on the table. Now somebody else has to come pick up the matzah and bring it to the radler, to the fellow who makes the holes in the matzahs. Maybe it sits on the table for a minute or 2 minutes. Now, those minutes may combine, we'll see that there's some question about this, with the earlier minute or two where the piece of dough was sitting on the table. So the Ramah said, all of these different pauses, maybe after the one who makes the hole in the matzahs makes the holes. Now the matzah goes on the stick that's going to take it to the oven. Maybe it sits on that stick for a little while. So all of these pauses might combine into the shear mill. Let's say the shear mill is 18 minutes. Maybe it'll combine into 18 minutes. And if you have 18 minutes between all of these different pauses, maybe we're going to run into a chametz problem. Excuse me. This is what the Ramah said we need to be worried about. We need to take care that shouldn't be a problem. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah here in Ois Katan Tez Zayin, ki yesh lachush shehashehiyos, because we need to worry about these pauses. Now, here's a very interesting Trumas Hadeshin that the Mishnah Berurah brings down. Well, but Trumas Hadeshin Kasav, the Trumas Hadeshin, it says, the bishah she'oisik be'isa esek gomor. Whenever you're working the dough with what the Chavetz Chaim calls an esek gomor, a real working, a real manipulation. dahainu, which is beitas hayodayim, if you're beating the dough with your hands. Veridud means when you're flattening the matzah into a matzah. We had in Parshas Pekudei, we had a pasuk. It's talking about the making of the ephod. I guess you would call it sort of like an apron that the Kohen Gadol wore, and it's talking about the weaving process of the ephod. And it says, "Vayiraku pache zahav." They beat plates of gold. They beat out thin sheets of gold. The kitzetz pesilim, and then they cut from those flattened sheets of gold. They cut golden threads, and those golden threads were spun together with the other yarns that were used to weave the ephod. Now, the word vayiraku pache zahav, means they beat pache zahav, sheets of gold. Now, when you beat something, you flatten it into a sheet. That's the meaning of the pasuk. If you look in the Targum Onkelos over there, on the word vayiraku, it says viradidu. So you see that ridud means to flatten. So over here, the Chavetz Chaim says, the b'shasha oisek be'isa esek gomor, when you're manipulating the dough with a real manipulation, the hainu be'itas hayadayim, when you're beating it with your hands to form it, or when you break off that piece and you have to use your hands to beat it down and make it into a circle. Veridud, or when you're rolling out and flattening the matzah. Afilu shah bein tayim ma'at, even if between these steps in the process you wait a little bit. The chazar v'shah ma'at, and then you have another delay. So, for instance, let's say, like we were describing the process. Let's say you kneaded the dough. Now you gave it to somebody else who rolled it out into a long log. So far, the dough is being manipulated with an esek gomor. Now you break off a piece, and you take that piece and you give it to somebody who's going to roll out a matzah. But now it sits on the table. So let's say it sits on the table for a minute. Now the person who's going to flatten the matzah takes the matzah, he starts rolling it out with the rolling pin. That's also an esek gomor. So now, says the Trumas Hadeshen, even though you had a couple of pauses in the process, ein mitztarif l'shir mil. Those pauses do not combine to keep the clock running to get to 18 minutes. Why? Because when you start working the dough again, mevatel ha'aschalta, that nullifies the beginning of the time process, the beginning pause, shehiskil lehisayr by kayach hakimutz, when the potential chimutz may have begun, while it was sitting and not being worked. So, in a nutshell, what the Chavetz Chaim is saying from the Trumas Hadeshen is, the piece of dough that you prepared for the fellow who's going to roll out the matzah, that piece of dough sat for a minute between when it was made into a piece of dough and when the person rolling out the matzah took it. So it sat there for a minute. While it was sitting there on the table, the koyach of chimutz, the potential of it to become chametz, that began. The clock, so to speak, started running down. You have 18 minutes. Now the clock is ticking. 18, 17 and a half, 17. Now the fellow is going to roll out the matzah, takes it, and he starts rolling it out. When he starts rolling it out, which is an esek gomor, it resets the clock. You go back to 18 minutes. Because by starting to roll it out, whatever koyach of chimutz there was in that dough, because it sat on the table, is now nullified. Now, however closer the chimutz became, the clock is reset, goes back to 18 minutes. You've got a new 18 minutes now. So you don't say, I only got 16 minutes left. We don't do that. Aval, however, but if the manipulation that you're doing to the dough is not an esek gomor, you're not really manipulating it well. It's only a slight esek. You're only manipulating it a little bit. Kigoyin, for example, when you make the holes in the matzahs, you have a flattened matzah. It's sitting on a table. You take a device and you roll over it to make the holes. That's not an esek gomor. That's not really working the dough. That does not reset the clock. Afal gav the mikri esek gamkein she'eno menicha lahachmitz ba'isa es. Even though it's enough of a manipulation that we're going to say the matzah cannot become chametz while you're making the holes in the matzah, at that second it's not going to become chametz. It does not negate the earlier delay. So if you're working on a piece of dough that already had 16 minutes of delay time where it was sitting, now don't think that by making the holes in the matzah, you reset the clock and you go back to 0. No, you're still at 16. And now if it sits before it goes into the oven, yitztaref, that amount of time that it's going to sit, it combines l'shir mil to the 18 minutes, va'aser, and it will become aser. The Das Maharil Hakmar B'chal Gavni, the Maharil disagrees with this Trumas Hadeshen, and he rules completely stringently, and he says, no. All the pauses do combine. There's no such thing as resetting the clock. Now, it's interesting. We're going to see later that there is a lot of room to be machmer. We never want the dough sitting. We never want the dough. As much as possible, we never want the unbaked dough just sitting and not being worked. Lamaisa, in our commercial bakeries, at least I know by me, where I bake matzah, we never have the possibility of the delays equaling up to 18 minutes, because the entire shift from the first time water is put into the flour and the first myra, the first dough, is kneaded into a dough until the last matzahs are in the oven and already baked to the extent of karmu paneha, where the face of the matzah forms like a skin, which is when the Gemara says that's when the matzah is considered baked and it can no longer become chametz. There's less than 18 minutes from beginning to end. So it's never possible that you had to combine the 18 minutes when matzah was sitting, because the entire time from when the first dough is kneaded until the last matzah is already in the oven and baked is less than 18 minutes. So it can never happen. But, and strange times, we live in strange times, and you never know what might be needed to do. You have to know the halacha. You have to know these halachas. So we don't want these pauses where there's unbaked dough. And indeed, even in the way we bake in the commercial bakeries, the way we do it, I try as much as possible. Don't let the dough sit. Don't let the dough sit. Don't let the dough sit. Let's go. Nothing should sit around. In a mass production facility, it's very hard to make sure that nothing sits at all. But we try as hard as possible that there should be as little time as possible where it's sitting. And that brings us, first let's do ice cut and Yud Zayin. Another one of the problems that the Ramah said, besides that the dough might sit and the time that the dough sits combines to the shear mill, there's another potential problem, and that is that maybe the dough will be brought to a place where it's warm. And if the dough is brought to a place where it's warm, it's mimar lahachmitz. It becomes chametz quicker. Ice cutting Yud Zayin shemimar lahachmitz ki shiura de mill, because the Chavetz Chaim says you have to remember, when we talk about a shear mill, when we say that you have 18 minutes until the dough could become chametz, loy nemar elabestam batim she'ein behem chaim gadol. That's only talking about normal houses where it's not excessively warm. Avo b'yesh ba yisrain chamimus. But if you're talking in a place where there's excessive warmth, memar lahachmitz b'pachas mishir zeh, then the dough could become chametz faster. The chimus process might go faster, and maybe it will become a chametz in less than 18 minutes. So no chances. We don't want to take any chances. Now we go back to the top line in the Shulchan Aruch here, and let's see what the Mechaber says. And this is a very tough. Here we have to be very careful what the Mechaber says now. Says the Mechaber, Va'achar shenisasku babotzek, after you work with a dough, v'nischamein bayadayim, and now the dough becomes warmed by the manipulation of people's hands. So remember, there's like a dichotomy over here. On the one hand, we say that as long as the dough is being manipulated and as long as the dough is being worked, it's not going to become chametz. At the same time, once you start to work with dough with your hands, the dough is getting warmed by your hands. Your hands are 98.6 degrees. So you're warming the dough by virtue that you're using your hands. So the Mechaber says, Once you start to work with the dough and that dough gets warmed up from your body heat, from the work of your hands, and also the friction of your hands also creates heat. If you leave that dough alone without any manipulation, miyad yachmitz, it could become chametz immediately. Ooh, scary thought. And these words, the Mechaber is bringing this halacha from a Chuvas Harash. The Rush says that once you work a dough and you start to warm up a dough with the warmth of your hands and with the friction of the manipulation, now it could become chametz right away. And therefore, the Mechaber is of the opinion that once you start working the dough, you really can't have pauses. You really can't have pauses because you warmed up the dough. So as long as you're working it, it's not going to become chametz. But when you stop working it and it's leidik, it's sitting alone, it's without being worked, now miyad yachametz, it could become chametz right away. Now let's take a look right away at the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Yud Ches. Says the Mishnah Berurah miyad yachametz. Olafizeh, Chavetz Chaim says, according to this Chuvas Harash, that it could become chametz immediately. Tzarich li zoyer ma'od. We have to take great care. La'achar she'archu v'rididu hamatzah. After we take a dough and we form it, and I assume with these two terms, archu v'rididu, what the Mishnah Berurah means, what the Chavetz Chaim means is la'achar she'archu. After we form the dough into a log, and then we're going to break off the pieces to make the matzahs. V'rididu, and then we flatten the matzahs into the matzahs. So now, at this point, the matzah has been worked. And now we have a flattened matzah that's sitting in front of the person that we call in Yiddish the redler, the person who's going to make the holes in the matzahs. You have to take great care that you should make the holes in the matzah immediately. And then after he makes the holes in the matzah, you have to make sure to get it immediately into the oven. Because the Mechaber just told me that after I worked the dough, as soon as we take our hands away from the dough and stop working it, it's going to become chametz right away. So what the Chavetz Chaim is describing over here really is that you're going to need the dough. Right away, you're going to form it. Right away, you're going to break off a piece. Right away, you're going to give it to somebody who's going to roll it out into a flat matzah. Right away, that flat matzah is going to be given to the redler to make the holes. And then right away, it's going to go into the oven. No pauses, because the Mechaber just said, once you start working the dough, then you leave the dough alone. It could become chametz miyad. So says the Chavetz Chaim, according to this, that's the way you have to do the process. Says the Chavetz Chaim, v'ha'olam ein nizarin b'zeh kol kach. And yet the world is not so nizar in this. And I can tell you that at a mass production basis, not possible. Not possible to do this. You have 30 women and men rolling out matzahs, and they finish a matzah, they put it on the table. You have 6, 7 men that are going around with sticks to pick up the matzahs and bring them to the redler. The matzah sits on the table for a little bit before somebody comes and picks it up. Then he brings it to the redler, and there's a line sometimes. Or even if there's no line, one person is holding 6 or 7 matzahs, and he's putting down one at a time. Then the redler radles it, he makes the holes, he puts it on the big stick. The big stick holds 5, 6 matzahs. So until they fill up the big stick, then the big stick is full. Finally, the guy picks it up and puts it into the oven. So in a mass production problem that there should be absolutely no pauses is kemat not shaykh. That's why you have chaburas who do small shifts. And they don't mass produce the matzah. They do only a few matzahs at a time to try and be nizar in this, that the taka should be no pauses. Now, the Chavetz Chaim does continue, and he is malamet chus. He says a rationale maybe why we're not so nizar to that extent. And he says, ve'efsher, it's possible, de miyad de ka'amar ha'mechaber lav dafka, that when the Mechaber says that after you work the dough, it is miyad yachmetz, it's immediately chametz, he doesn't really mean miyad. And like the Bir Halacha brings down, it could be that the Rush did not really mean miyad, immediately. Ella ritzoynoi loymar, what he meant to say was shir mu'at. It could be less than 18 minutes. It doesn't mean immediate, but once you work a dough and warm it up, so now it's machmetz in less than 18 minutes. Maybe we don't have a full 18 minutes. And therefore, we have to be nizar as much as possible that there shouldn't be these pauses. When we come Makayim, nevertheless, initially, if possible, your taka shouldn't let the dough sit even for a moment. The Chanal Barosh Hasif, Vayin Machakasavnu Bibir Halacha, he says, take a look at what I wrote in the Bir Halacha. Now, if you take a look in the Bir Halacha, Dibra Maschel, Va'acher Shenis Asku, Miyad Yachmitz, he brings down the Chuvas Harosh, he brings down Rebbe Eliezer Mimitz, the Mordechai, who, the Aguda, who brings this concept that it could be that it becomes chametz immediately. But then later, about halfway through the paragraph, he brings down here a Rambam. Ayin Barambam Perikei Meilchas Chametz Umatzah. If you look in the Rambam in Perikei of Hilchas Chametz Umatzah, Yud Gimel, Shekas, the Rambam writes, V'zel Shainai, and this is the language the Rambam writes over there. Kolzman Sha'adam Oisik Bebatzek Afilu Kol Hayom. As long as somebody is working with the dough, even all day, it cannot become chametz while you're working on it. V'im higbia yadai, but if he removes his hands from the dough, im shah kidei hiluch mil, if then you wait for 18 minutes, if you wait for the time it takes to work to go a mil, then it's going to become chametz. Hooray! So you see from these words of the Rambam, that the Rambam is saying even if you worked on a dough all day and then you left it alone, it still does not become a chametz in less than the sheer mil, which we say l'chumra is 18 minutes. Rashba, Chelik Aleph, Siman Kov Chav Daled, Masha Kazav B'Shem Ramban, Shaya Moilech Hamatzis Lataner Shaya Bericha Kama Botim. Said that the Ramban would take the rolled out matzah and take it to the oven, and the oven was several houses away. So clearly there was time. It took time to move the matzahs from place A to place B. So you see they weren't so makbid. Even though you see the Ramban changed. The only reason he changed was he was afraid that transport would take 18 minutes. All the way at the end of the Bir Halacha, he says, so we have this, this kind of lack of absolute clarity. We have the lashon of the Rosh, and we have the lashon of the Mechaber here, that it's possible that it could become chametz miyad. We have the lashon of the Chavetz Chaim here in the Mishnah Berurah that says lechatchila we should try that the dough shouldn't even sit for a moment. I know that for decades of running the matzah baking process for the yeshiva by us, this was always a sore point where people who would come to the bakery to take part in the baking process would always give me a hard time. They would go downstairs where the matzahs are being prepared, and they would say, look, there's a piece of dough sitting. Look, there's a matzah sitting. I say, look, we do the best we can. We do the best we can in a commercial setting. If you want that there should be absolutely no shehiyas, if you want that the matzah should never sit, then join one of these chaburas that charge $60 a pound, and they do 3 matzahs at a time, and then you can have no shehiyas. I can't do that in a process that's baking over a few days, 2,500 pounds. So we're going to have some shehiyas. We also have the Trumas Hadeshen that we heard earlier in this year that says some of these shehiyas don't combine. So like I said, the time that the piece of dough, the clump of dough that's going to be rolled into the matzah, the time that clump of dough sits before somebody picks it up to roll it out doesn't combine with the time that the finished matzah sits before it goes to the radler. Because in the middle, it was rolled out, and that's an Esek Gomer, according to the Trumas Hadeshen that resets the clock. So you have the Trumas Hadeshen, you have this Bir Halacha, brings down the Rambam, the Rashba, that you still have a mill. Lamaisa, I remember once I went to Reb David Feinstein, Shlita Zal Zayin Gezut and Stark. I went to Reb David, and I asked Reb David, I said, Rebbe, Yalamdeinu Rabbeinu, what do I tell these people that are giving me a hard time? And they're saying, the Mechaber says, Yachmitz miyad. They're upset that the dough is sitting. Reb David told me not less than 18 minutes. It's not going to become chametz in less than 18 minutes. The psak that we have, our hanhaga, is that we have that the zman of chimutz is 18 minutes. And if you don't have 18 minutes, it's not becoming chametz. And like I said, we can't possibly have 18 minutes because we start a shift, we set the clock, the last matzah goes in usually under 17 minutes, usually a little over, maybe 16 minutes. That last matzah goes in the oven, and that dough wasn't prepared all the way at the beginning of the shift. During the shift, we make many doughs. So this matzah that's going in from, let's say, 15 minutes and 55 seconds on the clock is probably from the last dough that was made, not from the first dough that was made. And it goes into the oven, and it takes, I think it's, my memory is escaping me right now, but I think karmu paneha in our oven, I think I'm remembering, is about 12 seconds. Karmu paneha. I for many years I stood there by the oven, and I look in the oven, and I clock it, and I take a look, and I could see karmu paneha on a matzah. When the surface of the matzah, it's very fascinating. You look in the oven and you look at the matzah, and you could see that change in the surface of the matzah from 1/2 a second to the next. It looks like a raw piece of dough, and then boom, it skins over, and you can see it. I believe it's about 12 seconds it takes till karmu paneha. Once it's karmu paneha, it's baked. We don't have a problem. Okay. Says the Mechaber, let's see, says the Mechaber weiter. So if we go back up to the Shulchan Aruch, we're on the second line. In my Mishnah Berurah, we're on the second line. In the Mechaber, on the middle of the line. Ve'im hischilu b'shtei isais ke'echad. Let's say you're preparing two doughs at the same time. Maybe you needed one dough and somebody else needed another dough, but you prepared two doughs at the same time. Vehechmitza ha'achas, and one of them becomes chametz. You look at one of them and you see the Siman chimutz. You see the signs of chimutz. It cracked, it bubbled up, it cracked. So you see that this dough is chametz. B'yadua shechmitzu gam hashenis, you know that the second dough is also assumed to be chametz. Afilu ein roin ba siman chimutz. Even if on the second dough you don't see any signs of chimutz. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting your test. Afilu ein roin. Even if on the second dough you don't see any signs of chametz. Says the Chavetz Chaim, va'afilu loy nishtar shir mil. Even if 18 minutes haven't passed. So you prepared two doughs. It's now 13 minutes after you prepared the doughs. You look at dough A and you say, whoa, this dough is chametz. Look, it's got cracks, everything. This dough is chametz, even though it's only 13 minutes. How about the second dough? How's the second dough doing? You look at the second dough looks fine, nothing doing. The second dough is also assumed to be chametz. Says the Chavetz Chaim, afilu hachi amrinan mistama yesham eze chamimut shenes chametz mayer. If you see that one dough became chametz, you have to assume that there was some kind of extenuating circumstance. Maybe it's too warm in the room, maybe something else is going on, but whatever caused dough number one to become chametz, we assume that it also caused dough number two to become chametz, and both doughs are gone. Says the Mechaber weiter, v'im hechmitza ad sheyesh ba stokim, if a dough becomes chametz to the extent that you actually see splits and cracks in the dough, even if the cracks are not forming like a spider web, where the cracks, the dough swelled up and the surface of the dough cracked, and now the cracks are combining and crisscrossing each other, that's a siman of real bona fide chametz. But says the Mechaber, even if the cracks are not merging together, one crack is traveling that way, one crack is traveling this way, and they're not, going together, merging together. Have a chametz gomer. That dough is chametz gomer. Once you see cracks, it's completely chametz. And if somebody chas v'chalila would eat it, that is chametz gomer. He's chayiv kares for eating that dough. If, on the other hand, the dough does not have a crack, I skipped the parentheses. Let's read the parentheses. What does that mean? Hichsifu panav pirush nishtane marisai leloiven. That somehow the surface of the dough became pale. It became whitened somehow. Ka'adam sha'amdu sa'araisav. Like somebody who took a fright and his hair stood on end. So that's what hichsifu panav means. It like went pale. Ha'oichloi potter. If somebody eats it, so he's not allowed to eat it, like the Mishnah Berurah will say, potter aval osir. You're not allowed to eat it, but he's exempt from punishment. He's not going to be chayiv kares. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Eis Katan Chaf, Ad sheyesh ba stokim. If a dough becomes chametz to the extent that it has cracks, va'afilu yesh stokim b'miktzas ha'isa. Even if these cracks are only on one part of the dough, hare kol ha'isa chametz. The entire dough is considered chametz. So let's say you prepared a dough and you rolled it out into a log, and on one end of the log you see cracks on the surface. You can't say, "Oh, I'll break off that piece." No, the entire dough is chametz. And so is true for this other siman of chimutz, of ichsifu panav. If the surface of the dough became pale, you're not allowed to eat it, but you're exempt from the punishment of kares. But this dough is forbidden for eating and to derive benefit from. Whether or not there's an issa daraisa and issa min haTorah to eat this dough, or is it only forbidden by rabbinic law? That we discussed earlier in Siman Taf Mem Beis Sif Aleph, which is interesting because I don't recall that. I don't recall that. 1 second. Taf Mem Beis Sif Aleph. I'm sorry, bear with me here. Let's come to show. All right, I'll have to take a look. I don't see it here right away. And I don't recall it for some reason. Oh, here it is. See, in the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Beis, on Yud Gimel Amud Beis, the Mishnah Berurah says over here, Isa shaloi nimtza ba'adayin shum sedek, rach she'esifu panel. A dough that doesn't have any cracks, just the surface paled, like we're discussing here, here we have the same question. Are you over daraisa? So he discusses over here at some length whether it's a daraisa or drabanan. I think he calls it chametz nuksha. He calls it chametz nuksha. And he says, you're not over by your rabbi yamatzah b'daraisa, but midrabanan it needs beer. Okay. Weiter. So we're in the middle of Eis Katan Chaf Aleph over here. The Kasvo Achrayim, the Achrayim write, the Tzarch Ledaktik B'Shir Zeh, that we have to be very careful with this shear of Hichsifu Panav. Kimotzayu Sheachsifu Panav, because this does commonly happen that the surface of the dough becomes pale. Ve'enish Sam Alev Lirais, people are not careful to notice that, to take note of that and realize that this is a dough that they should not use. Again, we, generally speaking, go so quickly with the dough that we never reach this point. Okay. Says the Ramah. By me, it's 3 lines up from the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch here at the top of the page. Hago. Vim hamatzah asuya. Let's say you already rolled out a matzah. So you needed the dough, you made the clumps of dough, you rolled out a matzah, you have a beautiful matzah ready to go. It's got to have holes made in it, and then it's got to go into the oven. Incidentally, I wonder if everybody realizes why we make holes in the matzah. The reason we make holes in the matzah, if you didn't make holes in the matzah, is 2 things. First of all, the holes in the matzah allow the heat to travel better throughout the dough so that the middle of the dough also gets heated. But if you didn't make any holes in the matzah and you put that matzah down on the floor of the oven, what would happen is it would bubble up like a dome because the heat from the floor of the oven would get trapped under the dough. It would go like this, and it wouldn't bake. It wouldn't bake well. So by having the holes in the matzah, it allows the heat to travel through, and the matzah stays relatively flat on the surface of the floor of the oven. Let's say you rolled out the matzah, and now there's a big line going to the fellow who's going to make the holes. And you're sitting there and you're watching the clock, and you're afraid, hey, wait a second, this matzah might end up becoming chametz. It's sitting over here too long. Mutter l'shavra, you're allowed to break up that matzah. So you want to take that piece of dough, and you say, yeah, I know you rolled out that piece of dough already, but it's sitting in it too long. So you're going to take it, you're going to crumble it up, you're going to make it back into a clump of dough. This way you're manipulating it, and now it can't become chametz. And according to the Trumas Hadeshim that we saw earlier, you're actually resetting the clock by doing this asik gomor, by mushing it back up into a clump. And now you roll it back into a matzah, because you figure that by doing this, you'll stop the clock. And according to the Trumas Hadeshim, you'll actually reset the clock. And you got a new 18 minutes. So the Ramah says, you're allowed to do that. Miu, however, toiv lizar lechatchila. It's much better lechatchila that you should not come to this. And you should make sure that there's going to be no pause. And once the matzah is rolled out, it's going to go straight to the person who makes the holes and straight into the oven. Now, there's something very interesting at work over here. Let's see in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and chav beis. You had this rolled out matzah, and you're afraid it's going to become chametz. Mutter l'shavra. You're allowed to mess up that matzah. You might think, I don't want to mush the matzah up and have to roll it all out again. You're afraid it's going to become chametz. I'll rub my hand on the surface of the matzah, and that'll be an asik. That'll be manipulating the dough so it can't become chametz. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no, that doesn't accomplish anything. Mikri asik. That's not called manipulating the dough. V'adarabba, oid gora. That's even worse than if you would just leave the dough alone. Because by doing that, you're warming it up from the warmth of your hands and from the friction. So you're not helping anything, you're only hurting. However, the Ramah said, you could do this if you have to, mush it up and make it back into a clump of dough and then roll it out again. But the Ramah finished the Seif and he said, Miu toiv lizar lechatchila. Lechatchila, you shouldn't do this. Says the Chavetz Chaim Chav Gimel, toiv lizar lechatchila. It is better to take great care lechatchila and make sure you shouldn't come to this. Why? Maybe if you're going to try to roll out this clump of dough into a matzah a second time, it's not going to roll out into a nice matzah. It's not going to be one. You see, when you knead a dough, you have one gush echad. You have one dough, one clump of dough. Now you break off a piece, you make a nice ball out of it, you give it to somebody who's going to roll it out to a matzah. He flattens it with his hand, takes a rolling pin, he rolls it out into a beautiful flat matzah. Now you have a flat matzah, and you fold it up, and you mush it up into a dough. Those folds from when you folded it up, they're still in there. You don't have one smooth, well-combined clump of dough. You have a folded, rolled up thing that you squeezed into a clump. And now when you try to roll it out, it's not going to roll out into a flat, uniform matzah. It's going to have lines and folds and everything else. So we're afraid you're not going to roll it out well again. It's not going to be uniform and flat like it was before. There are going to be cracks and splits and folds. Our custom is that we forbid kfulos, matzahs with folds, because the heat of the fire doesn't get into the folds. Like we're going to see further on, we should all get there in good health in Siman Tov Samach Aleph. Siv Hey, and therefore, and this is a concept that we already saw before. You should not start to form and flatten the matzahs until the oven is well prepared, it's shoveled out and everything, it's all ready to go. So that the rolled out matzah should not have to sit. You want everything to go like clockwork. We want that you should roll out the matzah, it should get the holes, and it should go in the oven. We don't want matzah sitting. I know in the title of today's share I put in that we're going to do Seif Gimel as well. I see that we're not going to get there today, so we'll have to pick up from Seif Gimel tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me for Torah learning. Everybody who needs refuahs, the Rabbi Shalom should shik Yeshuas and refuahs to everybody who needs it. The schus of Torah should be megan on Gans Klal Yisrael. The Av HaRachaman, the Rabbi Shalom, who is an Av HaRachamim, should have Rachmanis on Gans Klal Yisrael, and all of those who need a refuah and are suffering, the Rabbi Shalom should grant them a refuah quickly, and the Rabbi Shalom should protect everybody else. Nobody else should get sick. Let's not fall into the trap of listening to the news and saying, oh, this is going to last another X amount of weeks. Oh, so and so many more thousands of people are going to become ill. No. The Rabbeinu Shalom Chuas Hashem Karafayin. I'll tell you, I was speaking to my Rebbe, to Berurah Feinstein, Zal Zayin Gesund Stark, and I made a comment to him. I said the Rabbeinu Shalom was showing everybody that he could turn over the entire world, from one end of the world to the other end of the world, and the economies of the entire world. He could turn it all over in 5 minutes with something that's invisible, that you can't see, that you can't touch, that you can't smell, that you can't protect against, that all your technology is useless against. And Rabbi Ruvain's instant reaction to me was, right. And the same way he could that in 5 seconds, he could bring the Yeshua in even faster time. And the truth is that we're all talking about matzahs, and we're going to come to the Seder, we're coming to Pesach, and we say, matzah al shum ma. Why do we eat matzah? Because their matzah didn't even have time to turn chametz before the Rabbeinu Shalom came and redeemed them. So the lesson of matzah is Chuas Hashem keheref ayin. The Rabbeinu Shalom could stop all this now. In a minute, the Rabbeinu Shalom could stop the whole thing. Now you're going to look at me and you say, how? You don't have to know how. See, that's the problem. People say they don't believe it unless they have something that they can hang it on. If you tell somebody the Rabbeinu Shalom can end it in 5 minutes because the National Institutes of Health are working on a cure and they're working on a vaccine, so then they say, oh, okay, so then maybe. But as long as they're reading the news and they know that vaccines are going to take months and there's no cures in the pipeline, and everybody says there's no cure, so then they say, how could it end? So then for the Rebbeinu Shalom to end it is a Nes Nigla. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't like making a Nes Nigla. Pesach time, the Rebbeinu Shalom made Nes Nigla, as you see as Mitzrayim. But like this, the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't commonly make a Nes Nigla. But you don't need to know how. It's not your business to know how. The Rebbeinu Shalom knows how. I don't know. Maybe it'll be a change in the weather. Maybe the stars will line up in a different way, and the radiation from Mars combined with the light from Venus and this and that will combine and bust up all the viruses, and it's all over. We don't need to know how. Let it all go away and let all the scientists and doctors scratch their heads and let them take 2 years to figure it out. And 2 years from that, they'll come and they'll say, oh, we finally figured out what happened. I don't care. The bottom line is the Rabbeinu Shalom can make it go away right now. And that's what we have to believe, and that's what we should ask for. Not another single person should get sick. And every person that's sick should get better, and they should get better now, and they shouldn't have to suffer for another 10 seconds. That's what we wish on Klal Yisrael. That's what we wish on the world. Around Shem Shishik, Yeshuas, and Refuas. Everybody should be well. Thank you for learning Torah with me. Have a wonderful rest of your day.